What if the cure for our civilization's impending collapse requires abolishing like every single law on Earth?
I mean, that is a massive premise right there.
Right, like no constitutions, no courts, no traffic regulations, just a total wipe of the global legal hard drive.
And doing that because, and this is the wild part, humanity has supposedly already gone extinct 4 times.
Yeah, 4 times. And we're currently hurtling toward a fifth.
It is a genuinely sweeping idea. We're looking at a document today that essentially diagnoses the entire human race with this fatal disease and then offers a completely radical and arguably pretty shocking treatment plan.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so glad you're joining us because when you look at the news, climate, gridlock, global conflicts, economic anxiety, do you ever get that sinking feeling that the systems we use to run the world just aren't built to fix the world?
I think everyone feels that fundamental frustration at some point.
Exactly. And that frustration is exactly what we're exploring today. We are cracking open a highly provocative philosophical manifesto. It's dated January 21st, 2024, and it's titled, "The Future of Humanity Should Be Like This."
By an author identified as Deiform Buddha. And, this text is fascinating because it doesn't offer small incremental policy tweaks.
Right, no new tax codes here.
Exactly. It doesn't suggest a different voting system. It's attempting to diagnose the root cause of why human societies fail on the planetary scale, and then it just builds a completely different operational paradigm from the ground up.
And before we dive into the deep end here, we should definitely make a quick note on impartiality, because this manifesto takes direct aim at some highly charged political and economic systems.
Oh yeah, it heavily critiques both capitalism and socialism.
It really does. And it advocates for a massive restructuring of human society. So we want to be super clear right up front that we aren't taking any political sides here.
Right, we're not endorsing the author's specific worldview either.
Exactly. Our mission today is purely to explore the architecture of this text, to understand its internal logic and see how the author connects these massive concepts.
It's really about understanding the framework. I mean, you don't have to agree with the blueprint to find the engineering fascinating.
That's a great way to put it. And the engineering of this text starts with a pretty intense look backward into deep history.
It certainly does. The text opens with an explosive historical claim. The author states that based on archaeological and scientific exploration, humanity has actually faced extinction 4 times already.
4 complete planetary resets, which is, that's a lot.
The claim of past extinctions is interesting, but the true divergence from mainstream thought is the underlying cause the author assigns to these events.
Right, because when we usually think about a mass extinction, we think in purely physical or geological terms.
Astronomical even. Like an asteroid impact in the Yucatan.
A supervolcano erupting or a sudden ice age?
But according to this manifesto, those past extinctions were not random cosmic bad luck. They were the direct result of what the author calls overall spiritual degradation and the dimming of human heart.
Wait, hold on. I need to stop you there because this is a massive leap. A giant asteroid or a shifting tectonic plate doesn't care if you have a dimming heart.
I know it sounds completely disconnected at first.
Right. How does the author connect personal morality or spiritual degradation to a planetary extinction event? Usually biology and morality are treated as 2 totally separate domains.
And that is the exact tension the text demands we confront. In this author's framework, you cannot separate the spiritual from the physical.
They're like a single mechanism.
Exactly. The text lists the core symptoms of this dimming heart as the pursuit of sensory pleasures, the relentless quest for power, and a really fierce, violent competition for survival resources.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection.
It also highlights a fundamental disregard for the creator, a lack of appreciation for natural resources, and a complete disregard for life, which, by the way, is capitalized in the text.
Okay, so if I'm understanding this, the author is saying the spiritual decay is the actual trigger. Like if a society is completely consumed by greed and the pursuit of power, they're going to strip mine the planet, hoard resources, wage catastrophic wars.
Yes, absolutely. The physical destruction of the habitat isn't a random disaster in this view. It's the guaranteed mathematical outcome of the spiritual decay.
So it's like a civilization-level check engine light that we keep ignoring.
That's a perfect analogy. The text argues that extravagance, squandering, and this frenzy of competition inevitably trigger a collapse. The environment gives out, or the society destroys itself from within.
Which brings us to the present day. Because the author doesn't just bring up these 4 past extinctions as a fun history lesson, it's a direct warning to you and me.
very direct.
The text characterizes our current modern society by its boundless greed, extravagant squandering, obsessive pursuit of wealth, and insatiable desires. The author is basically saying we are exhibiting the late-stage symptoms of the exact same disease that wiped out previous iterations of humanity.
It's an imminent crisis diagnosis. The frenzy for competing for resources that we see globally today is, according to the text matching, the levels right before those previous 4 extinctions.
So the cliff is right in front of us.
The cliff is right there.
So if we are currently repeating the exact behaviors that triggered the last 4 planetary resets, we have to look at the emergency exits available to us. Like if the current systems are driving us off the cliff, what are the mainstream paths we might take to hit the brakes?
Well, the text systematically evaluates the options we currently have for governing ourselves out of this crisis, and it dismisses them with almost brutal efficiency.
Let's look at the first one. Military control or authoritarian rule. The author tosses this out entirely.
Yeah, just throws it right out.
The text calls it purely barbaric and states it'll only result in poverty and societal chaos. So ruling by force is a dead end.
Which leaves the 2 massive economic paradigms that have largely defined the modern era: capitalism and socialism.
And the way the author critiques these 2 systems is honestly one of the most compelling parts of the manifesto. It sets up this fascinating, almost tragic paradox for human development.
I completely agree. I found this part incredibly counterintuitive.
Let's walk through it. The text argues that if humanity chooses the path of socialist collectivization, the toiling masses will live in poverty. But, and this is the key part, the overall human lifespan will extend.
And then it flips the script entirely. If humanity opts for the capitalist path, the market-oriented approach, the toiling masses can actually lead affluent lives.
Yeah.
Capitalism brings the maximal development of productivity.
Right.
However, the text argues the overall human lifespan will shorten.
See, I am really trying to wrap my head around this logic because normally we associate affluence and wealth with a longer life. Like if a society is wealthy, it has better healthcare, safer infrastructure, better nutrition.
That's the standard way we think about it, yeah.
Why on earth does the author argue that the incredible wealth generated by capitalism shortens the human lifespan while the poverty of socialism actually extends it?
To understand this, we have to clarify what the author actually means by overall human lifespan. They're not talking about individual life expectancy.
Oh, like they aren't saying that you, the listener, will live to be 85 instead of 75.
Exactly. They're talking about the lifespan of humanity as an entire species. They're talking about the timer ticking down to extinction number 5.
Ah, okay. That changes everything.
It really does. The text explicitly states that while capitalism brings affluence, it does so by depleting natural resources at a massive scale, which inevitably leads to what the author calls a backlash from nature.
So capitalist affluence is basically a high burn rate. We get all the luxuries, the technology, the comfort, but to produce all of that, we are burning through the Earth's battery at terrifying speeds.
That is the exact mechanism, yes.
Affluence accelerates extinction because it requires pulling far too much out of the planet far too quickly. And that ties right back to the dimming heart symptom of extravagant squandering.
You nailed it. Capitalism requires extravagant consumption, which is that core symptom. Now look at socialism through this same lens. Socialist collectivization, in the author's view, lacks that maximal productivity. It inevitably leads to poverty for the masses. But because it is economically inefficient and lacks that extravagant consumer consumption,
It inadvertently forces conservation.
exactly, it drastically slows down the burn rate of the planet's resources. It stretches out the remaining resources.
Wow, so it extends the overall timeline of the species, even if the daily lived reality for the individuals within that system is miserable and impoverished.
It is a devastating two-way trap.
It really is. You have option A, live a comfortable, wealthy, technologically advanced life, but speed up the total destruction of the human race through nature's backlash.
Or option B, delay the destruction of the species and survive longer, but force everyone to live in stagnation and poverty.
Neither of those is an acceptable long-term strategy. I mean, you're either choosing a fast, comfortable death or a long, miserable survival.
And that trap is the core justification for the rest of the manifesto. Since both mainstream economic systems are fatally flawed in opposite directions and authoritarian control is barbaric, the author insists that humanity must adopt a radical third alternative.
Which brings us to the author's proposed solution. The text introduces what it calls the ideal path for the future of humanity. It's called Wefeng-style communism.
And we need to point out the author puts a massive flashing neon sign next to this concept.
Yeah, stating unequivocally that this is absolutely not the communism advocated or practiced by Marx, Lenin, or Mao Zedong.
That caveat is so vital. By explicitly distancing this model from Marx, Lenin, and Mao, the author is signaling that we need to throw out our historical baggage regarding that word.
Right, this isn't about traditional proletarian class struggle or violent revolution or state-mandated ownership of factories.
The author is describing an entirely different operational blueprint for society.
And the claims the text makes about this Wefeng-style blueprint are staggering. The author states that this specific system has actually already been practiced on Earth for 15 years.
15 years.
And based on that practice, it claims that this model can permanently solve nearly 90% of the challenges humanity currently faces.
90%. I
Yeah.
mean, that is a massive number. But the text provides specific examples to back up the breadth of that claim.
Like what kind of examples?
Well, it says this system can solve massive, complex geopolitical issues, like territorial disputes between heavily armed nations.
Okay.
But it also claims it can solve highly personal, localized domestic issues, things like elder support and family care.
See, this is where I struggle with the linguistics of the text. The author claims there is a 15-year practice happening on Earth. Now, the text doesn't give us the GPS coordinates of this community.
No, it doesn't.
But it's safe to assume it's a localized, relatively small-scale experiment compared to the global population. Right.
That's a fair assumption.
So how does a local communal experiment scale up to solve something as deeply entrenched and complex as international territorial disputes? I mean, how does sharing resources in a small community stop two nuclear powers from fighting over a border?
That's a great question. And the connection seems tenuous until you look at the underlying pathology the author established in the very first section. Remember the dimming heart.
Right, the pursuit of sensory pleasure and the fierce competition for survival resources.
Exactly. In this author's framework, a family abandoning their elderly parents because they're drained on personal finances and a nation going to war over a piece of resource-rich land, they share the exact same DNA.
Oh, I see. They're both symptoms of resource anxiety and the selfish hoarding of the dimming heart.
Yes. So the scale of the problem doesn't actually matter to the author. The root disease is the same.
So if Wefeng-style communism fundamentally alters how a community views ownership, wealth, and shared responsibility, it cures that resource anxiety locally.
Exactly. Elders are cared for because resources aren't hoarded individually. And the author's logic dictates that if you apply that exact same cure universally, international borders simply lose their meaning.
If nations aren't driven by a greedy frenzy to hoard resources, the territorial disputes just evaporate. You cure the micro and the macro naturally follows.
That is the theory behind the blueprint.
It's like we are talking about a completely new operating system for global society. You have this old, buggy system that causes wars and poverty and burns out the hardware.
Yeah.
And the author wants us to wipe the hard drive completely clean and install Wefeng OS, which supposedly patches 90% of our errors.
I love that analogy.
But you can't run a new operating system on top of the old one. To install this, you have to delete the old architecture.
And this is exactly where the manifesto moves from a theoretical critique into a highly actionable and incredibly radical set of demands.
The text states that to move into this new era, all constitutions, all laws, and all regulations across the entire globe must be completely abolished, eradicated, zero laws.
It is the absolute rejection of the modern legalistic state.
Yeah.
I mean, most of us view the law as the only thing standing between civilization and total anarchy.
Right, it's the glue holding everything together.
But the author provides a very specific economic and operational argument against the very existence of law.
Let's dig into that rationale because it really flips our normal understanding of order upside down. The author argues that the more extensive and detailed the clauses in constitutions and laws become, the more problems actually arise in society.
Just think about the mechanics of a deeply complex legal system. The text views the legal system not as a mechanism that solves problems, but as an industry that generates them.
How so?
Well, to enforce millions of pages of detailed laws, a society requires an ever-expanding army of management personnel.
Oh, right. You need local police, federal agents, judges, defense attorneys, corporate compliance officers, massive prison infrastructures, bureaucratic administrators. The list is endless.
And what do all of those management personnel represent? Massive societal operational costs. A huge percentage of human energy, intellect, and physical resources are poured merely into managing the friction of the rules we've created.
So the text essentially views the global bureaucracy as a black hole. It swallows the resources that could otherwise be used for human flourishing.
Exactly. And to cut those catastrophic operational costs, the laws themselves just have to be deleted.
But you cannot just create a vacuum. If you abolish every law on Earth tomorrow morning, you get the exact barbaric chaos the author warned us about when they dismissed military control.
That's the obvious fear, yeah.
So what replaces the legal system in Shuifeng OS? The text introduces the replacement. It calls it 800 Values for New Era Humanity. And the author specifically states they have prepared these 800 values to ensure the orderly functioning of society.
It is a total pivot from external enforcement to internal guidance. 800 specific values are meant to replace millions of pages of global legislation.
And to actually make this massive transition work, the text introduces one final non-negotiable requirement.
This is the big one.
It says that in order to live a happy life and ensure the continued existence of humanity on Earth, every single human being must undergo a spiritual purification. And conveniently, the author notes that they have also prepared the course for this spiritual purification.
This purification is the linchpin, holding the entire radical structure together. Without it, the whole thing collapses instantly.
It sounds like trying to implement a global honor system. I'm imagining deleting all the cybersecurity software, all the firewalls and antivirus programs from a computer network, and just hoping the motherboard naturally decides to reject malware.
That is exactly what it sounds like.
Without laws, without police, without external enforcement, how do 800 written values prevent someone from stealing their neighbor's property or resorting to violence?
The answer lies in the fundamental difference between how a law works and how a deeply held value works. Laws, by their very nature, are reactive and external.
Right. You don't steal a car because you know there's a police officer who might catch you, a court that will try you, and a prison that will hold you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is external compliance. And as we discussed, maintaining that threat of external force requires high societal operational costs.
You have to pay someone to watch the people and pay someone else to watch the watchers.
Precisely. But a value, if it is genuinely internalized, is proactive. It is internal compliance.
Okay.
This is where the spiritual purification course comes in. The author isn't suggesting we just hand out a pamphlet with 800 rules and hope for the best. The purification implies a total psychological and spiritual rewrite of the human operating system.
So if this course successfully instills these 800 values deeply into the subconscious of every person, the desire to steal the car vanishes entirely.
Because their purified internal value system makes the act of stealing fundamentally unthinkable to them. It cures the dimming heart.
That makes sense within the framework. The author is making the profound argument that humanity cannot legislate its way out of extinction.
No, you really can't.
You cannot write enough laws to stop the physical destruction of the planet if the human heart remains greedy. We can only evolve our way out of it through internal transformation.
Well said. The external structures we rely on, the wealth generation of capitalism, the conservation of socialism, the vast machinery of the legal system, they're all just expensive, temporary band-aids on a dying patient.
And the only permanent cure is to change the fundamental nature of the patient through these 800 values.
It's an all-or-nothing proposition. The survival of the human species relies entirely on the universal success of this inner transformation.
If the purification works, we achieve a post-law utopia. If it fails, we fall into anarchy and hit extinction number 5.
High stakes, to say the least.
We have covered a massive amount of philosophical ground today, so let's quickly recap the journey of this deep dive for you. We started by exploring a 2024 manifesto that diagnoses humanity with a fatal disease, a dimming heart characterized by a greedy frenzy for resources that threatens to trigger our 5th planetary extinction.
And from there, we examine the author's really bleak assessment of our current options, specifically that trap of modern economics, the poverty-inducing conservation of socialism versus the resource-depleting, extinction-accelerating affluence of capitalism.
And finally, we unpacked the author's radical proposed solution, a totally new paradigm called Shuifeng-style communism, which demands the complete eradication of all global laws and constitutions.
Replacing external police forces and courts with a value-driven society achieved through a mandatory spiritual purification course, instilling 800 specific values.
It is an incredibly sweeping reimagining of what human existence could look like. But before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something that challenges the mechanics of this proposed utopia.
Let's hear it.
Well, the author argues that laws create massive problems and astronomical management costs, right? And therefore, they must be entirely replaced by these 800 values and internal spiritual purification.
Right, that's the core argument.
But human language and human situations are infinitely complex. In a completely lawless world, what happens when two fully purified, well-intentioned people genuinely interpret one of those 800 values differently in a specific situation?
Oh, that is a fantastic point.
If there's a dispute over how a value applies to a new piece of technology or an unforeseen community issue, how is it resolved without a judge? Does a purely value-based society eventually, out of sheer practical necessity, just have to invent laws and courts all over again to settle the debate?
That is the ultimate question for any utopian blueprint. I mean, if you wipe the legal hard drive clean, does the system inevitably just write the exact same code all over again the first time it encounters a glitch?
It's definitely something to think about the next time you hear a politician say, we just need to pass one more law to fix things. We want to warmly thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the frameworks that shape our world, keep looking at the root causes beneath the surface, and we will catch you next time.